third day of the state capture inquiry has wrapped up, with former Deputy Finance Minister Mcebisi Jonas making shocking allegations against the Gupta brothers today. ENCA's Erin Bates was at the inquiry and she joins me now. Well, it was the day many people were, looking forward to. Fireworks were expected. Erin, did it live up to those expectations?
I would say so, yes. We had some jaw-dropping allegations from Mcebisi Jonas today, particularly around that meeting of October 2015, the 23rd of October it was, at the Saxonwold compound of the Gupta family. And it's a meeting that's long been in the public domain, but we had some new information on what exactly happened. And on his version, which hasn't been cross-examined by representatives for Fana Hlongwane, Duduzane Zuma, or the Guptas as yet, really shows on his version, that is, the kind of tactics that were used, he says, by a Gupta brother to try and induce him into taking a bribe and also taking the finance minister position, but with the understanding that he would be a state capture skivvy.
And what did he say to them?
Well, interestingly, he said he would have no part in this, and as the meeting progressed, he got more and more angry and eventually stood up and decided to leave. And it was then, he said, that he met this Gupta brother in a kind of bar area of their home and was offered 600,000 rand cash. And it was then, he says, that there was information from this Gupta brother that they'd been following him, that they had intel on him and his family and some of his colleagues, and threatened him if he gave any information about this meeting to the public or anybody else, that his political career would be in danger, and also that astounding allegation from Mcebisi Jonas that they would kill him if he disclosed that this meeting had happened. Also important to note that he said Duduzane Zuma was there as well as Fana Hlongwane, and that they didn't talk. He said that the Gupta brothers spoke like a radio, but that they were present. And in fact, Duduzane Zuma did an interview with Milton Nkosi of the BBC in 2017 when he said there was a meeting, he was present, but there was no bribe. But moving on from that, Mcebisi Jonas also spoke about why he said Nhlanhla Nene was fired, and this is in fact what he had to say on that.
The pressure on us from the former president and other members of cabinet to approve the nuclear deal was immense, and was ultimately the trigger of Mr. Nene's dismissal on the 9th December 2015, after he again refused to back the deal at a cabinet meeting on that day.
Of course, we know what followed Nene's dismissal. I mean, it was a disaster. And on the back of the 600 million claims, I guess a legitimate question was posed by the evidence leader advocate Philip Mukwena to Mcebisi Jonas as to why he took such a long time to make a statement on the Gupta offers.
Yes, a pertinent question, because as we heard from the head of the legal team on Monday, this inquiry cannot presume any facts. They need to begin at start, as it were, and make deductions based on the evidence presented before them. And that's exactly why Advocate Philip Mukwena asked Jonas, why did it take you so long to make these disclosures about what had happened in that meeting? Also interesting to hear that Jonas spoke about consultations with senior members of the ANC, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, for example, also Zizi Kodwa and Gwede Mantashe, before his disclosure of what had happened in that meeting, or what he says had happened in that meeting, in a press statement that was released in March of 2016. But just to go back to the dynamics in that meeting, Vuyo, he really took us through step by step his version of what happened. And on his version, this Gupta brother, and he says he understands it was a tool, but he was basing this on media information, photographs, and other media reports, as he'd never met any of the brothers before this meeting of the 23rd of October 2015. He says he can't rule out that it may have been Rajesh Gupta. But it seems on his version that the tactics of this Gupta brother moved between saying, for example, we hear from the old man that he likes you. So starting with flattery, then saying we have information on you and your colleagues, an inferred threat. Also, exactly. So constantly moving the tactics tactic in terms of trying to push Mcebisi Jonas into a corner and get him to take the finance minister position with that 600,000 rand cash as a sweetener on his version, and all kind of playing out in that case. And they bragged on his version. This Gupta brother said, "We've turned Duduzane Zuma into a billionaire. He has a house in Dubai." And they also spoke about the extent, the size, the amounts of money they'd managed to accrue. Here's an example of that.
I said that I was going to leave and stood up to leave. I said that I was not interested in being a minister of finance, and if he thought I would work with them, he would have to tell me precisely what it is that they do. At that point, Mr. Zuma and Mr. Hlongwane also stood up. I was angry at the stage, and he was also a bit emotional. He was also emotional. He said something along the lines of, I quote, "Look, do you know who we are dealing with?" He was agitated and said, "You think it is illegal?" He said that everything that they do is legal and that they create jobs and contribute to the economy. He said that at the moment, we, which I understood again to be the Gupta family, earn about 6 billion from the fiscus through various entities, including Eskom, Transnet, and government departments. He said that they wanted to increase this amount to 8 billion.
Interesting for you. You see there, as he talks about that Gupta brother saying we contribute to the economy, he actually bristles. He sort of straightens up as he says it, as though his body's resisting that statement. And it really was something to see him go through the motions of describing the different kind of threats, tactics, sort of compliments that were made to him during that meeting of 23 October 2015.
Well, talk to us, Aaron, also about the Hawks' involvement in this whole saga. I mean, here is a unit that's supposed to look at priority crimes, and stuff like what was coming out of Mcebisi Jonas's testimony today is supposed to be treated, with the priority that it deserves.
Yes, and I think important to remember that he is making these presentations to the inquiry under oath. This is a proxy court of law, and that's why the issue of whether or not the likes of Hlongwane and Duduzane Zuma's lawyers will be allowed to cross-examine is so important. But on the issue of the Hawks, questions, for example, on why Jonas did not sort of follow up on this astounding, terrifying meeting he says happened through those various authorities, the police, the Hawks, and the like. Him saying he had so little confidence in these authorities at the time because of the political climate and because of the kind of erosion of law enforcement authorities that he'd perceived. And him talking specifically about a meeting with a Major General of the Hawks where he says he was presented with a drafted statement made in his name that they wanted him to sign, basically putting an end to a case the Hawks perceived as being a DA case and saying that this is a DA case, we don't want to follow it through, and here's an affidavit we've written or a statement we've written in your name, please sign it for us. And this in the presence of an attorney, no less, basically sort of conspiring on his version to make a living case dead. So we had that, trying to kill a case, and then also Mcebisi Jonas saying he had an allegation with someone giving a death threat, trying to kill him if he didn't do what they wanted. So absolutely, you asked if there were fireworks. There was a fireworks show today in the state capture inquiry.
Well, speaking of fireworks, he also detailed what appears to be like a rather a precarious situation that he says the finance ministry and treasury were at some point under during the Zuma administration.
Yes, and he was speaking about the constitutional obligations of the Ministry of Finance and the minister, and really honing in on that nuclear deal and saying that Treasury was of the view that the nuclear deal as it was constructed was not feasible, and also that on his version they had an ethical question. Could the South African state agree agreed to this deal, which would incur severe debt that would affect generations of South Africans to come. And he said the view of Treasury, or the team at Treasury at the time, was that simply it wasn't feasible. And that then created an animosity with President Jacob Zuma as he was then. And he said that it was also the Treasury's role in deciding and being the gatekeeper on government finances that implicated or kind of precipitated the animosity between Treasury and then President Jacob Zuma.
Well, you speak of animosity. I remember like Judge Zondo's questions getting really straight to the point when he was like sort of drawing, this like picture of what Treasury and the Finance Ministry were under. Judge Zondo saying, asking him directly, what form did that, hostility towards the Finance Ministry take? Who in cabinet exhibited that hostility? And his answer was?
Not very direct, I didn't think. And I wondered if we were in a court of law, if someone would have said, you're not answering the question, you're not getting directly to what the chairperson of this inquiry has asked. But yes, Zondo, they're really trying to eke out of Mcebisi Jonas answers to questions that the inquiry must address, and must address based on the terms of reference, which was signed into law, perhaps not particularly willingly, by then President Jacob Zuma before he stepped down and resigned as president. But yes, one of the questions the inquiry has to see to is, in terms of that meeting of October 2015, did the then president know about it? Did he play a facilitator role? And Mcebisi Jonas is at the center of several central questions that the inquiry has to decide upon.
Who's next?
So, Fakey Mentor is up next on Monday when the inquiry resumes, and then we also hear that we will have 2 GCIS or government communications witnesses on Friday next week. So we do know that the investigations team and the legal team for the inquiry are busy consulting with other witnesses. Those are the people that we know about for now. And when Duduzane Zuma was actually in the Randburg Magistrates Court yesterday in a case over a car crash which ended up with 2 women dead, a journalist asked him if he would be testifying in the inquiry, and he said, if I must, I will.
Well. Aaron Bates, thank you very much. She was, of course,